So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged into another battle replay, and this is going to be on the Great Wall of Middle-earth, RAMMAS ECHOR, which has been a map which has existed ever since vanilla, although it's seldom used, mainly for the reason that usually the only real feature of the map is the big wall in the middle and then there's only one choke point, so while visually it looks very impressive, it doesn't actually offer an awful lot mechanically. However, this is a modified version, and the modifications were done by Froggy. The replay itself was sent in to me by Langer, who is one of the players in the battle as well, so a big thank you to both of them for making the map and sending the replay in. And this is going to be, I believe, all four of the defending armies are going to be Gondorians. So they are going to be defending the walls of RAMMAS ECHOR. Of course, the road to Minas Tirith will lie very open if the walls are breached, and I believe it's going to be 3 Mordor armies here at the back and 1 Umbar army which is over here to the side, which is going to be laying siege, so somewhat lore friendly. Just a quick look around the map before we begin. Obviously the main defining feature is the thing that was in the map before. Obviously RAMMAS ECHOR dominates the landscape, and there is obviously the gateway in. There are also a few things which the attackers can do. They have a bit of raised ground which they themselves can get up onto if they want to try and use their archers to at least somewhat counteract the very superior position that the wall offers the defenders. And obviously there's some sort of features and encampment around here which obviously doesn't offer an awful lot mechanically for the attackers, but for flavour. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall there is a little bit more in terms of terrain features. We have obviously these pieces of raised ground here, which if the wall is lost, the defenders are not completely sold out to sea, as it were. They will be able to retreat and form more defensive lines back a little bit further. The stakes offer a few choke points as well, which is good, because obviously previously the entire fight would have taken place around the gatehouse and it would have been a huge mosh pit. Now, however, a little bit different. There's also a few settlements here. There's actually a floating windmill here, which is rather interesting. Obviously not intentional, I'm sure. But still, we have a few more areas right here at the back as well, so some good raised terrain features. I like this because it obviously means that the map has got a little bit more to offer other than just the gate, which was all it was before. Obviously as well, you can see the spike of terrain in the distance over there, but obviously this was made by Froggy, so you know, it's little things like that is not really too important. Obviously they're not going to affect the mechanics of the map at all. And yeah, so we'll get on to the army compositions now. We'll start off with the attackers. Right here at the back we have Froggy. So again, the map maker is going to be in the map as it is played. We have some Moran on guard here at the front, which are not great in terms of their ability to kill infantry. They are obviously spears. They offer a little bit more than the Orc fodder, but you also have to pay for them rather than the first unit of Orc fodder, so there is that. A little bit further back, this is also an RP series battle, by the way, so the army compositions are not entirely chosen by the players just for the battle at hand. There is a sort of rolling thing going on I believe it's the DF Discord. He's also got a full line here of Orc Maulers, which their AP will be very useful against the Gondorian defenders. Obviously they're not particularly high quality, but they will still at least be able to offer a bit of AP damage. Here we've got more Orc Maulers, obviously the Troll Drummers to keep these low tier Orcs in a line. The Moran on infantry, which is a little bit more professional as far as Orc infantry goes, but they're still very much focused around their numbers. Individually, sort of the line infantry from the Kingdoms of Men are going to be superior to Moran on infantry, but the numbers game is what Mordor obviously play quite well, and they're going to be backed up by Moran on halberds as well, so the phalanx very useful, the armour piercing also very useful against Gondor. Then a little bit further back we do have some Moran on archers, some Orc fodder over here of course. The Moran on archers will be useful just, again, if you're on the attack, it's always useful to have a bit of skirmish pressure on the defensive lines. And then obviously the Orc Javelins, their AP damage, they may not be the finest quality Javelins, but the AP is still going to be very useful. And also we have a Troll Catapult, which obviously they move substantially faster than regular catapults, and also the crew itself is a lot more useful in melee than a standard crew would be. Second Mordor army we have Master Blaster, and he has got some fodder as well, some Troll Catapults, more Orc Maulers. I would imagine the Mordor army is going to be more or less very similar. Again, a lot of Moran on halberds, Moran on archers and Orc Javelins. Back here a little bit we have more Moran on infantry and more Moran on guard as well as some more Troll Drummers. So yeah, a very, very similar army in fact. The third one, let's see what this one offers. This is actually looking quite different. We have Tundra's Fox, who has a ton of Orc fodder, so I presume he will probably be the one to take the brunt of the initial casualties as they charge forwards. And we also have some Moran on archers back here with their stakes deployed. It's unlikely that Gondor will chase Mordor this far to the edge of the map with any cavalry they may have, but you never know. Moran on archers over here, Orc Javelins, once again more Orc fodder mixed in with Moran on infantry. It's very possible that I'm missing some elite units as they're mixed in here, but certainly not going to miss the Olag High. They stick out. Definitely a very strong unit, obviously going to be very good at disrupting those solid Gondor infantry blocks. And that's going to be pretty much it. So certainly a lower quality army overall, but he does have the Olag High. And then the final attacking army, Umbar, which I would imagine they have no choice but to bring a little bit more quality in their armies at the very least. He's got some Abrazani Narduzagar with the armour upgrade. Their skill should be very useful at dealing with some of the lower tier Gondorian troops. He also has some Castamir's Legion. This is Mech Grim, by the way. So the Castamir's Legion, obviously, very, very powerful line infantry as far as a massable line infantry unit goes. Even Gondor cannot match the Castamir's Legion. Got some Corsair Fences, obviously very strong at dealing damage, good armour piercing, but they are somewhat fragile as well, so you do need to look after them. A risky unit to bring, certainly. More Castamir's Legion. Abrazani Nardubawi with the armour upgrade again, a very, very solid higher tier armoured archer with a shield, of course, so that means they're going to be terrific in a skirmish fight, even against Gondor. Gondor and Umbar very much based around their survivability at range rather than the damage they deal. Some Corsairs, obviously you need some chaff, and the Corsairs, they are not completely free like the Orc Fodder, but they also deal a little bit more damage than the Orc Fodder, but they are also really just as, if not even more fragile, to be fair. We also have some Naru Naaru Sentinels, very strong unit of pikes, a lot of Corsair pikemen as well, which could be very useful provided they can get into position without getting shot to bits. Corsair Blackguards, we've seen how effective they can be if they can release their payloads, but again, they're a prime target for being focused down by archers from the walls. We also have some more Nardu Bawib, so certainly a very elite army over here. Corsair Blackguards, Crossbow Corsairs, more pikes, more Narduzagar, a couple more units of Castamir's Legion, Corsairs and Corsair Fences. So yeah, Grim, certainly with the vast majority of the quality, it would seem, from the attacking army, so Mordor probably going to be leading the way before Umbar tries to break the Gondorian force. But speaking of the Gondorians, let's hop over to the other side of the wall and see what the defenders have brought. Now, I believe there is a certain theme which will become a little bit apparent as we go through. We've got some Gondor archers, of course. Skirmish is going to be very, very important as the battle unfolds, because obviously the choke points are still going to be a very real feature, and the Gondorians are going to be able to use their skirmishers and their artillery to good effect if they can get them into the right positions. Guards of Osgiliath, presumably after Osgiliath fell, they fell back to RAMMAS ECHOR to help the defenders here. And we also have some RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers, so they are very much fighting on home turf. As far as militia archers go, they're probably my favourite in the game, purely because of their armour and their shield values, just making them even tougher. And I believe the RAMMAS ECHOR units have been given some chevrons to simulate the fact that they are on home turf. And overall, I think that all of the armies will include RAMMAS ECHOR garrison units to some extent, and the archers obviously going to be very good. Although, to be fair, you know, damage dealing might be a little bit more important on a map like this rather than survivability for the defenders. We'll see. Catapult, obviously, again, if that gets into position, it could wreak some havoc. The civilians in the settlement just beyond the wall are getting ready to take up arms in defence of it. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison over here as well. I believe they have the armour upgrade. I believe when you see some of the units wearing full chainmail, that means their armour has been upgraded. And overall, the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison are a bit of a rare breed among militia units. I believe the Eastron Clansmen, they're the only ones I can think of off the top of my head anyway, are human units that are of militia tier, but they use a sword. So this obviously means that they surrender the anti-cavalry capabilities that the spears offer, but they are also better in melee against other units, and particularly against Moran on Guard and Orc Fodder, they could trade very nicely. But obviously against Moran on Infantry, they will lose pretty happily. Pelagia Marines, again, another unit, if they get into the right position, they could be very, very devastating. A couple of units of them. A couple of units of Axemen of Lasarnak, which, again, with their AP damage, could be very, very useful against all of the attacking armies. A couple of units of Gondor Infantry, with varying levels of armour, actually. We have some with only the first level of armour upgrades, and some with all the levels of armour upgrades, so they've got the full plate. Caer Andros Swordmasters over here as well, obviously very, very strong. I would say they're better than the Abrazani, even with the armour upgrades, because the Gondorians in general, I believe the Caer Andros Swordmaster got better stats than the Narduzagar, although the armour upgrade might change that. I'm not entirely sure. They have sort of changed over the course of development. And then we also have some Citadel Guard, which I believe might be the General. Indeed it is. The Citadel Guard are AP, but not multiple HP. So let's see if the other armies offer anything a little bit different, whose armies are a little bit more scattered around the place. So we have Tydasium, who's going to be playing again as Gondor, of course. Pelagia Marines, Guards of Osgiliath, which we've seen previously. We've also got some Axemen of Lasarnak, Gondor Infantry. I would imagine these armies are all going to be fairly similar. Again, Gondor Infantry, Axemen, Gondor Infantry, a big massive units including RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison. A little bit further back, we do actually have some cavalry. So we have the Pinneth Gelin Cavalry, who are going to be renamed to the Sentinels of Hirluin, I believe, in 0.97. Obviously Lancers, good Lancers as well. They'll be able to do a decent amount of damage. They've got decent skill in melee, but the Gondorians in general don't really want to stay in melee with other cavalry for too long. But they could get some good harassment off, because obviously all of the attackers are primarily infantry. It's the trolls they need to watch out for, but if they steer clear of that, they should get some decent damage done. We'll see how far they're willing to chase. while back here. We do have Rules 1, and of course we have the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison on horseback again. So again, Militia Cav is not going to be too potent off the charge, but there are a lot of them, and they could do a decent amount of harassing as the attackers move forward, because again they have relatively little in the way of anti-cavalry options. Umbar have got the crossbows and the blackguards, which as soon as the cavalry gets in range will do a lot of damage. Mordor has the trolls, but the Mordor armies in particular could be pretty open to attack if the Orc javelins are not on their toes. And again, another unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison there, another unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison on foot. As we move into Rules' army, which seems to be mostly here at the back, more cavalry as well, so Rules has gone for very much the cavalry-centric army, which doesn't surprise me too much. I imagine he's probably going to do fairly well with them. Some civilians, which are going to be the first ones to defend the gates. Civilians, Gondor infantry. This is going to be the majority of Rules' army, I think, and then the final army I believe. Yes, indeed, we have Mech Starling, who's got some RAMMAS ECHOR garrison of his own here at the front, another catapult, so the artillery very much in favour of the defenders. Veterans of Osgiliath, a lot of Pelagia Marines, a lot of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison, Axemen of Lasarnak, and that's pretty much going to be it. There may be a few hidden units as well, there may be a few units of hidden rangers here and there, which I'm not seeing. We shall see. So, prediction time. It's going to be tough, I think, for the attackers. These defensive positions are pretty damn solid. The defending armies are certainly of lower quality. The civilians and the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison will find themselves getting butchered, especially by the Umbar army, which is very, very strong with regards to its infantry. The defenders, I think, are going to be entirely reliant on how well their cavalry does in the initial phases, and how well their archers and artillery do at really peppering down the attackers as they come through the choke points. Because if it comes down to a battle of sheer brute force, the attackers are going to win that fairly easily, with the trolls, with the Umbar infantry, with the numbers of the orcs, and also the relatively lower quality of the defensive forces. But, you know, for once I'm actually going to back the defenders. I think that, I don't know actually, it's a very, because I'm not really sure about how the map is going to unfold. I'm not sure how the defenders are going to approach it. The catapults could do a decent job here, but yeah, I'm gonna go defenders just. But I think very early on we'll learn if that prediction is true or not based on how the cavalry and the artillery does. If they do poorly, then it's not going to look good. But I think there will be a little cut here as the attackers start to move into position, because they are quite far away. If the cavalry sallies out, then I will of course cut back in then. But I will rejoin when the battle starts. So the defenders have actually come outside, and this obviously makes a little bit more sense with how the map is structured, so I really should have realised that before. But I think based on these new developments, I would change my prediction actually. I think the attackers are going to enjoy this a little bit more, because it's a little bit more open. I felt as though the attackers would have to go through that singular choke point at the start and subject themselves to the artillery barrages, whereas now they won't have to do that as much. They will of course still have to endure the archers. The Gondorian archers, as a general rule, other than the rangers, don't tend to do an awful lot of damage, at least not in comparison to some other skirmish forces. So I think the attackers will much prefer this. Of course, the lower tier Orc armies, Tundra's Fox army in particular, is still not going to enjoy the treatment they're going to receive at the hands of this Gondorian defence, but now that there's a lot of this going on where civilians are having to sort of hold the front down, I think the attackers are going to be in a much better place than I initially thought they were going to be. This is obviously still a relatively tough nut to crack, but the attackers could come crashing down with their full force, which would not be great for the defenders. We shall see, and the reason I've jumped back in now is because I'm not entirely sure when these cavalry units will start to make their move, because once they do, the fight is going to kick into high gear relatively quickly. How well Rules, and I believe Tidasium has got a couple of cav units of his own as well. I believe as soon as these cavalry units get activated, then a lot is going to be decided relatively early on, because if this cavalry can get a bunch of decent value off, then the Gondorians are going to be in a very good place. But if they don't, that's a lot of units which have gone down the drain. It's a big numbers advantage which the attackers can start to pull out. And you can see that already the Orcs are starting to sort of, the big churning mass is going to start moving forwards. The cavalry just visible through the fog. Now the saving grace over here for Rules is going to be that really the only thing that Mordor can use to effectively zone out the cavalry is going to be very low tier spears and the javelins. Provided that he singles out one Mordor army in particular, that isn't going to be too much of a problem. Although you can see here that already the Orcs in fully loose formation, and it looks like the first charge is going to happen on Tundra's Fox's army. The frame rate juddering under the weight of all these Orcs, but the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison do pull out. I think they see the Olag High coming over, and the Olag High would make very quick work of Militia Cav. The morale would not hold itself together at all well. Here comes the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison. Master Blaster should be on his toes, and indeed he is. Unfortunately for rules, there are a lot of spears over here. He is going to have to make a move at some point with his cav. Otherwise they are just going to get boxed in. I think he does need to use them earlier. Well, sooner rather than later, because if he doesn't, then they're just going to end up boxed in by the spears, and then the cavalry will become all but useless. The RAMMAS ECHOR garrison cavalry, the first ones to sally out in defence of their home turf. These guys are coming in. I mean, Lance Cavalry, which these guys technically are, they may be Militia Cav, but they are Lance Cavalry. They could do a decent amount of damage on the charge as the frame rate struggles under the weight of all these orcs. Not the best charge, only a portion of that unit connecting, and unfortunately this is going to be bad for them. They could break here, actually. The Olag High coming in. Yeah, again, RAMMAS ECHOR garrison Cav. They're on the retreat here. Not really any harassment happening. Not really any soft targets to go after. I mean, even the Orc fodder are technically spears. I mean, they're terrible spears, but they're still spears. So they will be able to get some decent value against the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison. We can see there that even just that rather poorly planned charge only connected with a portion of the Orc fodder, but the Olag High managed to do a lot of damage, despite only being in melee with them for a very short while. Obviously the cavalry are going to be very nimble to get away from them. As all of these Orc fodder start to move forward, you can see that Brim's army, definitely the one that is being left in reserve. They could be the hammer blow at the end, which destroys the defenders, potentially. Not often you see a 4v4 in a situation like this either. And it's not as if all the attacking armies are hugely elite, but we shall see. Here comes the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison once again. Are they going to get a side charge into the Orc fodder? It looks as though they are. Although they will much prefer the Orc fodder get charged than the Corsairs, and once again the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison being forced to pull out. Apologies for that, my mouse just decided to have a heart attack. Meanwhile, once again he's having to pull out. I mean, this is the problem. He is going to have to use this cavalry at some point. He is going to go for the Umbar army, which is a much softer target, of course. There are less spears over here, but also if those crossbow Corsairs get just a single volley in, really, it's going to be a real problem. Oh, that frame rate. That's disgusting. Getting into the Corsairs, doing a lot of damage to the Corsairs, obviously very low in terms of their defensive capabilities. Partial charge onto the Abrazanim as well, although the Olag High are right over here. Going in for another charge, trying to get as much damage done as quickly as they can. Getting into the Corsair Blackguards as well. Have they done enough damage to justify their existence? I'm not sure. They might come back. They do have a significant portion of their unit still remaining. The second charge coming in from the other unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison. Once again, the Olag High are here, so I can't imagine they're going to stick around in melee for all that long. The RAMMAS ECHOR garrison, yeah, both units have them breaking off very quickly. Obviously, Umbar, they're going to be able to stand their ground. The Corsairs taking the vast bulk of the casualties, which Umbar won't be too concerned with. And they are actually being chased off. I mean, the Olag High could make it so these units of cavalry do not come back. I'm not entirely sure if the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison can claim to be useful here. They've gotten a few peripheral kills, but not nearly enough for a unit of cavalry, I don't think. But again, to give rules credit, it is a very difficult setup to try and charge into. There's a lot of Orc spears out here. And he did do some damage to the most dangerous of all the attacking armies in Umbar, and he does still have some cavalry, including the Pinneth Gallin cavalry, which should be able to do significantly more damage than the Militia Cav before it. There's no signs of much movement elsewhere on the field just yet. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison cavalry do return from breaking, but again very depleted, and obviously they have just returned from routing, so their chances of breaking when they charge in again pretty high, and they are also taking more casualties from the Orc archers as they push in. And now they cycle back out. Obviously this is a relatively long fight as well. I think the Troll Catapult immediately over here is going to start firing. Here we are. So what is it going to be firing at is the question. Again, using your artillery too early might be a bit of a mistake. I mean, I believe actually that this outer defensive position is a little bit more fragile, so I think the Orcs could probably get away with just using their infantry to try and crack this and saving their artillery for harder targets past the wall itself, perhaps. It's going to be fairly tricky to hit something from that range as well. I mean, Gondor are covering quite a large surface area of this. a narrow miss. Is he going for the Axeman of Lasarnak? He may very well be. Getting a small hit there on the Gondor infantry, but the Gondorians are spread out to the extent that this isn't going to bother them too much. The attacking artillery could be much more devastating than it is currently being, and actually Rules is now pulling back all of his cavalry to the interior, which might be the better move. Wait for the attackers to have expended most of their range potential, and then utilise your cavalry behind the wall, because inevitably I think the attackers are going to be able to break through at least the outer defence. Whereas in here you can see it's basically one long choke point with a few sort of gaps in the stakes which the attackers can use to try and circumvent things. So very much a layered fight this time, rather than just the singular choke point that RAMMAS ECHOR used to be. Meanwhile, the archer's going to begin firing. Doesn't look like it. I mean, I would certainly imagine that Tundra's Fox Orc Fodder Horde is going to be the first ones in, which is, even for militia archers, is kind of a waste of their ammunition. Fodder already impetuous. There is a unit of the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison down there plugging the gap. They will need assistance, of course. In fact, the Olag High are coming in, which will be a real problem for a lot of these units. Really, I think the Axeman of Lasarnak will be needed to so much as even scratch the Olag High. They aren't going to be committed just yet, but the potential for them moving in does exist. They are right around the corner. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison forming up, and it's only civilians that are going to be in support of them behind. They may wear the helmets of the Gondorian infantry, but they are certainly not thought of as highly. Here we go. Now the archers are starting to fire into the Orc Fodder. Obviously they're going to do a lot of damage. I mean, the Orc Fodder are very, very limited in their ability to withstand any sort of punishment. They certainly live up to their name, and so even militia archers are going to be able to do a pretty hefty amount of damage. And of course, with how many of them there are covering a lot of surface area, the lower accuracy of the militia archers is not going to matter too much either, as we will have the beginnings of the melee engagements. The Orc Fodder are going to charge in here. The RAMMAS ECHOR garrison will be very, very happy to fight Orc Fodder. This is pretty much the best targets for them that exist. As sword militia, they aren't going to beat much in terms of overall quality, but the Orc Fodder they certainly will. Meanwhile, around here you can see that there's also the beginnings of some forming up. Tundra's Fox can't be expected to do too much with just Orc Fodder against them, particularly this line over here. Much stronger with Gondor infantry with the armour upgrades as well as Axeman of Lasarnak, so the Orc Fodder will be sent packing very, very quickly by them, as they are being at the front. So Tundra's Fox is going to need some support from his allies. You can't afford to just send forward Orc Fodder on their own. As I've said before, they need support. They are there to be a tar pit, but if they're not tar pitting for anything, then their presence on the front line is relatively pointless. At least Moran on guard should be sent forward. I would say some Moran on infantry also needs to be sent forward, actually, to just sort of give the Gondorians something to think about. Make them commit some of their stronger units forward. The Olag High are right here, of course, which will make quick work of both the garrison and the civilians. Moran on guard from Master Blast are now moving into position. The civilians are now marching forwards, which obviously the civilians, the closest thing the human kingdoms have to a fodder unit, but they will be able to beat the Orc Fodder for damage. Those pitchforks a little bit better than the toothpicks that the Orc Fodder carry around. Well, that artillery is still firing in, but not really hitting anything too critical at the moment. It is going to be Froggy's army pulling around here, which this defensive line looks a lot more suspect. Only civilians, really. Well, here we go. My frames abandoning me once more, but the Orc Fodder trying to overwhelm the civilians here, but the support of the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison just in behind should stand them in pretty good stead to sort of hold out against just Orc Fodder for a little while at the very least. Moran on infantry also moving forward, which will be much more like if we're cracking through this defence. Oof. My frames! What is going on? So yeah, this is obviously, again, a big engagement. I'm actually surprised that Tundra's Fox chose to engage with his own volition over here. This was clearly the strongest part of the defensive line. The Gondorian infantry and the Axeman of Lasarnak together with their armour upgrades as well will make very, very quick work of the Orc Fodder. It says victory seems certain for them, but I can't imagine that will last. I mean, there are some Moran on halberds moving forward, pushing to the front line, which will be significantly better against all of these Gondorian units. But they will need to move forward in numbers if they want to have a lasting effect on this Gondorian defence. I'm not quite sure why the frames are dying. And this is also a bit of a problem. Tidassia moving his Axeman of Lasarnak down here, for which he could use to wrap up the line. And this could be very bad news for the Orc Fodder indeed. Obviously the Axeman of Lasarnak much better against armoured units, but against something as bad as the Orc Fodder, their high attack values will stand them in good stead as well. And the Axemen of the Sarnak, of course, with the armour upgrades, are a little bit more defence-orientated Axemen, so they will be able to survive low damage units like this for longer than other Axemen would. For example, the Corsair Savages will actually trade probably pretty poorly with Orc Fodder just because they have very low armor values, in fact 0 armour, which means those Orc Fodder would be able to deal damage to them, whereas not so much for the Axemen of the Sarnak. Meanwhile, the civilians and the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison are here on the front line, but the presence of the Olag High and the Morannon Guard now moving forwards. That is the Abrazani Nadu Bawib as well, so the attackers certainly very serious about putting pressure on the defensive positions. I'm not sure why this unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison would be committed to the front line. They stand no chance against Morannon infantry and Olag High. They will be pounded into the dirt. The Axemen of the Sarnak could do a bit of damage to the Olag High, though, to be fair, and if they do kill the Olag High, that's arguably the most damaging unit that the attackers have available dealt with, and I think Mordor, Tundra's Fox, realises that, so he's going to pull them out as the Axemen of Lasarnak join the front line. The Morannon infantry is also coming in here. They can't afford to play cat and mouse too much, though, the attackers. They do need to use their mass and their bulk to start really inflicting some casualties on these units. That Axemen of Lasarnak unit also does not have the armour upgrade, they're just the standard variant. As the Orcs continue to fight on the front line, there's those RAMMAS ECHOR garrison. They don't have the best angle, actually, though. The terrain's somewhat working against them there, in fact. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening over here. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison once again being committed over here to help deal with the Corsairs. The Blackguards are over here. They don't want to be in melee if they can help it, though. They really want to be using their ranged prowess, if at all possible. Meanwhile, this unit of Axemen of the Sarnak got caught out a little bit too eager to try and wrap up the Mordor lines, it would seem, because they got surrounded by a bunch of low-tier garbage, the Orc Fodder and the Corsairs, and that ultimately ended up costing them. And they are routing, which is going to leave the door open. There is a gap in the Gondorian lines now, which if the Orcs are quick, which Tundra's Fox is going to be pouring his Orc Fodder through there, the outer defence is going to look a little bit more ropey from here on out, I would imagine. There's a lot of arrows flying backwards and forwards. Over here it's the Morannon archers firing into the defensive positions. The Gondorian archers and the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers will quite happily skirmish all day long, but really the defenders are going to need their ranged units to do a lot more in terms of damage than they're currently doing. The Corsair Blackguards are also firing. Maybe they were committed forward a little bit prematurely, though, because they are certainly going to find themselves subject to a lot of arrow fire. You can see there that the Gondor archers up on the hill certainly making a target of them, and the Corsair Blackguards, not the sort of thing you can afford to lose, certainly not before you've expended their javelins, because they can be a very, very potent unit indeed. Meanwhile, the Morannon halberds on the front line doing a very, very good job of keeping all of these fodder and Corsair units pushing in the right direction. The Morannon halberds with their AP going to be very, very useful against the Gondorians. So over here, the strongest point of the Gondorian defence already looking pretty ropey. And the outer defence is not going to last all that much longer, I would imagine. Over here, the Axemen of Lasarnak have stabilised things, as well as an additional unit of garrison. But it's not really over here where the defenders are struggling most of all. You can now see over here that civilians are being committed to the front line, so Froggy's army starting to make its moves. Morannon infantry marching into the civilians with the support of some Morannon guard, which, you know, civilians, they might be able to do well against Orc Fodder, but as soon as genuine units start coming for them, you can't expect them to move mountains. Over here we have Morannon infantry charging into civilians and RAMMAS ECHOR garrison, but obviously Froggy's army is in direct support, so reinforcements are going to be committed whenever they are needed. And to be fair, I think the outer defence is not going to last too much longer. Certainly not with the very heavy presence which the attackers have put over here. To be fair, the gap has been closed somewhat. An additional unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison coming over here to try and stall, but now the Olag High are over here absolutely smashing the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison into submission. They may be better at fighting in melee than spear militia, but you cannot expect them to go toe-to-toe with Olag High. And here come the Castamir's Legion, but again, this outer defence I feel like was always going to be where the attackers could capitalise a little bit. The defenders were always going to have gaps that would appear in their lines a little bit more. As the catapult shots come careening in. Again, only a glancing blow on that Axemen of Lasarnak unit. So I think the time has come for the defenders to try and consolidate around a more singular choke point rather than trying to hold three. In fact, that choice may very well be taken away from them. You can see the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison are breaking. This force over here through the central choke point is going to be trapped, I believe, surrounded and ultimately destroyed. Victory seems certain for the Axemen. As the Troll Catapult firing into this more densely packed defensive position, but again, nothing too telling at the moment in terms of a catapult blow for the attackers. As the orcs start to stream forward, Castamir's Legion are also coming forward, so certainly the attackers are not backwards in coming forwards, which is good to see. Bit of aggression where it's called for. Froggy's army is now also coming forward in force. The RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers, who have been committed to melee and civilians, obviously these are the lowest morale of all of the Gondorian units, and they are not going to enjoy being surrounded by all of these nasty orcs. And the orcs are going to be much more likely to stay in formation longer because of those troll drummers in close proximity. Tundra's Fox's Olag High also moving over here. They've been a real fixture in the battle so far. Aggressive Olag High being used to clean up all of these lesser units. So, the first phase of the battle, the first few choke points have been dealt with, and the attackers can afford to be pretty pleased with their day's work so far. Meanwhile, fighting back to back, the Axemen of Lasarnak trying to hold back the onslaught of Orc fodder, Corsairs and Olag High that are coming their way, but this of course leaves this unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison to try and hold back the floodgates, and the dam has burst almost immediately, so yeah, this is going to be a slaughter. Not pretty for the Gondorians, Mordor forcing their way through this outer choke point. However, this is going to be a battle which is fought in phases, and the defenders have certainly not used up the vast bulk of their strength yet, which is going to be tied up in their artillery, I believe. Again, these civilians, this Gondor infantry, so again, very aggressive here from the attackers, which I like. They're going to force the defenders here to make some sort of stand. If they don't intend to commit a lot of resources to defend this outer portion of the gate, then they should fall back, which I believe is what they're starting to do. You can see Rules is starting to fall back some of his infantry. I think this is going to be left here as a rear guard to sort of prevent this Orc death blob from stopping this retreat. Civilians and Gondor infantry being thrown under the bus, but something has to be. Meanwhile, over here, another unit which I'm actually surprised is still out here are the Guards of Osgiliath. The pike unit like that could be very useful in the interior defence, but you can see the Umbar taking the lead over here with Corsair pikemen and Castamir's Legion with the support of a bunch of orcs now arriving. So yeah, the Gondorian lines are too paper thin, and the orcs are going to be able to smash their way through here. The defenders need to be careful here. They need to set up a sort of a more comprehensive defence somewhere, and unfortunately Rules is starting to send forward more infantry, which I don't agree with. Now they're falling back, which is good. Maybe he was trying to save those Axemen of the Sarnak, but they broke. The Olag High too strong. So yeah, now we shall see if the gatehouse itself is going to be a much more effective stand. There's a lot of infantry back here that they could use, but again, a lot of it is garrison. Gondor infantry over here as well. Archers are in good positions though on both sides. They may be militia archers, but they have a fantastic shot. But Gondor need to start bulking up on one choke point, I think, because otherwise we're going to start seeing a very familiar story here as the orcs continue to move forward with their sheer brute force, and combined with that elite Umbar infantry, there's no danger of the orcs chain routing anytime soon, especially not in conjunction with those troll drummers. So the attackers have played this just right so far, I think. They managed to zone out that early cav. They managed to very aggressively take these choke points, and now they can move into RAMMAS ECHOR itself. I was about to say I wouldn't have sent in the Castamir's Legion as the vanguard, and Grim seems to agree. I would certainly send in some lower tier units now, because this I think is where the defenders are going to make much more of a stand. As we can see, a lot of these units are routing, to be fair, but you can see there's a lot more infantry on tap, ready to hold these choke points. There's a lot of archers as well, which can fire right into the flanks of the orcs as they move forward. So we shall see. Already some arrows flying, actually, which I'm not sure I agree with. I think they've actually ceased firing. Yeah, this unit of arrows, this unit of archers over here doesn't really have the best of shots yet. I would definitely try and wait. I mean, some of them are sort of sneaking into the front lines, and to be fair, they are going after Corsair pikemen, I think, which is a very juicy target indeed. You'll scarcely find a unit more vulnerable to archers in the game. But we have a singular unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers here, potentially holding the line, waiting for the defenders to try and get themselves sorted out. But obviously this singular unit of archers is not going to last too long under this sort of assault. Start to see some artillery as well. What have we here? Troll catapult back there? Where's the defensive artillery would be my question. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers up there. Defensive artillery could be very useful as they start coming through the gates. We have the Lango's catapult is back there. Starling's catapult is back there. So a A really deadly V formation here, combined with archers and artillery, could be the attackers' undoing. It will need to be. There's also javelins in there, Pelagia Marines, because, as we've seen already, when it comes down to sheer brute force in melee, the attackers have a very distinct advantage in this fight. This is where I imagine my frame rate is going to start crying. My PC will probably have a heart attack here as the attackers move forward in a giant blob, and all of these arrows start flowing into this column of infantry as it streams forward. And yep, here goes the frames. Oof. There are obviously these side roads, however, which the attackers are not fully... Oof, dear oh dear. Bit of friendly fire there, but also quite a lot of damage to those orcs and those corsairs on the way forward. But the attackers are not just limited to going down this road. There are obviously these side paths that they can start attacking as well. But this obviously also is an opportunity for the defenders to potentially start getting in some flanking damage with Gondor infantry, and in particular something like the Axemen of the Sarnak. Meanwhile, these artillery shots proving to be very brutal. Lots of arrows also flowing into the orcs immediately, trying to recoup some of their losses here. The defenders already, a lot of these forces are starting to become shaken.
Only half the enemy force remains.
One of the defending armies already down to half strength, which is a good... Oh dear. That there, I think, was a bit of friendly fire. Was it? Oh, there's that troll catapult up on the hill trying to shoot over the wall, potentially. Meanwhile, the Gondor infantry, standing in formation with the back of the guards of Osgiliath, should be just fine with all of this ranged support. Very risky endeavour to shoot into the infantry that's so densely packed towards your own men, but it paid off there because it was a fantastic hit. Very dense cluster of men there that were hit, and obviously that's going to facilitate a rout. The troll drummers are a little bit too far away, actually, I think, to actually get the morale buff. Where are they? Now, they're right next to the wall, so the morale buff should have actually been in effect. So, even with that, the damage they took there from the catapult, too much. More orcs streaming forward, but I can see why the attackers would be... Oh, another good hit by the catapult here. Certainly paying for themselves thus far. I can certainly see, though, why the attackers would be very reluctant to move in with their full force here. Obviously, they're going to try and bait out a lot of the defending artillery, javelins and arrows to try and be used earlier, so when, in particular, when Umbar's army is committed forward, they don't have to worry about being skirmished down. They can just focus on their melee prowess. But meanwhile, these Pelagia Marines already doing a grievous amount of damage, and the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison holding resolutely on the front line with the support of all of these skirmish units and artillery pieces. The garrison will hold for the time being. I don't expect them to live to see the end of the battle, but holding firm so far, and that's a big rout. Some of those units may come back because some of them are pretty healthy, but the orcs sent packing. Good initial engagement here for the defenders, which somewhat makes up for what happened earlier on. Well, still some RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers there. Let's see. So what gets committed forward next? So it looks like a little bit more of a serious engagement. More Moran on infantry and more Moran on guard, a little bit less in terms of fodder. Although fodder will of course make up a part of the orcs' plans, as always. Troll catapult actually getting a good hit there. Right into the heart of that unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison. The artillery getting itself positioned on those hills, allowing the attacking artillery to still be useful, even though the wall is in place. The wall, of course, will make it a lot more difficult for the orc archers to get some effectiveness off. However, you saw the Abrazani Nadubawu try and get in here for some shots and immediately get eviscerated by the Pelagia Marines. Here comes the garrison moving to engage the orc fodder. Still that side defence still very much in effect. Oof. That's not the sort of friendly fire the defenders need if they're going to carry the day here. Troll catapult's only getting hits on civilians, it's not really the most worthwhile target. The orcs and Umbar are going to have no trouble dealing with the civilians in melee as it is. Better than hitting nothing, I suppose. Here comes the defensive artillery again. Bit of a grazing shot that, another grazing shot. So far, the catapult been brutally effective. Pelagia Marines just biding their time. They are the target of some orc archers as they try and fire over the wall, but it's not the easiest shot for them to make, and they do have shields, of course. There's still more units of garrison as well. That looked like a pretty decent hit. Into guards of Osgiliath as well, so a worthwhile endeavour. Well, this singular unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers were sent forward to sort of try and stall the orcs, but they are of course going to get overwhelmed once more. Moran on infantry going to be too strong for them, but another unit of garrison coming forward here, and they are actually going to be able to get a rear charge into the Moran on infantry. garrison comes forward, all of these brave militiamen holding the line, hoping that their archers and catapults can do most of the heavy lifting. There are also Gondor infantry over here, much more, as you know, those are Gondor archers. Still with the armour upgrades though, so again they're just trying to put stuff in the way, try and allow these defensive skirmishers to do their thing. As soon as the arrows, javelins and artillery fire, however, as soon as that supply runs dry for the defenders, they will be in a little bit of trouble. The brute force of the attackers could then start to shine through. You can see here the Pelargir Marines immediately started to do some damage, presumably the Morannon halberds to target. More hits from the artillery there, nothing too devastating, but still, more kills. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison victory is almost a certainty, which is surprising. That definitely comes down to the ranged firepower. The Pelargir Marines in particular are going to be doing a lot of damage. The javelins, armour piercing of course. Arrow fire will also do a good job against the Morannon Guard, and this second wave from the Orcs, that was a bit of friendly fire, which is mostly hit Orcs actually. So again, the second wave of Orcs sent packing, broken. Those Abrazani Nadubawi trying to get some shots of their own off, but again it's going to be very difficult. This is obviously a very defendable position. A lot of arrows flowing into this area as well. Usually the Nadubawi do very well in a skirmish fight, but sheer weight of numbers here is going to give a distinct advantage to the defenders. More units from the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison moving forward to try and plug the gap. That's a lot of Orcs they're having to sort of stand before, however, and you can see that they're already wavering. You can't ask the world of a militia unit like this. Here comes some Orc Maulers as well. Now, Orc Maulers will do a decent amount of damage to all of the Gondorian units on offer with that AP, but of course they are going to be a very, very juicy target for all of the archers. More good hits from the artillery as well. That is going to be a break from the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison, but the defensive line has reorganised itself, and the archers in particular are going to be getting a lot of kills. They may not have any Athelian Rangers, Gondor, but in this sort of situation, even basic archers are going to be able to get a lot of kills. Catapult hit there, hitting its own wall. That'll be work for the Gondorian stonemasons to do, should they be victorious in this battle. The Orc Maulers almost immediately routing. So again, they came forward relatively unsupported actually, which unsurprising that they broke almost immediately. Meanwhile, the Abrazani Nadubawi, they may be shaken, but the higher morale of the Umbar units overall, especially more elite units like this, showing itself as even a very depleted unit, managed to hold its courage long enough to connect in melee with the Gondorian defensive line. That is the Troll Catapult, which is trying to get some good hits here onto the Gondorians, but the stakes will block it, so they have to try and thread the needle. If they did get a hit, it would be obviously very devastating. But I don't know. It might be worth their time to just sort of, just bide their time, wait for the defensive artillery to have expended its ammunition and then move them in, because the trolls themselves will be able to shrug off arrow fire for a decent amount of time, certainly long enough to get a few volleys off. Meanwhile, the brave RAMMAS ECHOR garrison still holding the line, doing what they are paid to do, holding their great wall. Ah, that was a good shot. So they did manage to thread the needle, bisecting there. The Gondor infantry guards Voskiliath getting a bit of damage done there to the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison as well. Sabrazani Nadubawi was in position. Another unit of RAMMAS ECHOR garrison being committed to the fight. We are actually past the halfway point at this point, and we are dead even in terms of kills. And it is a 4v4, remember, as well, so it's unlikely that we will see as serious of a comeback mechanic as usually happens in these battles, where with their superior numbers the attackers are able to spin it around. They do have superior quality still, but we'll see what wins out here. Superior defensive positioning or the overall quality of your troops. You can see the Gondor infantry actually moving forward now, trying to attack into the side of these units of Morannon infantry. The Morannon infantry, their quality showing a little bit more now. The RAMMAS ECHOR garrison certainly not up to the task of beating them one-to-one, but there are some Gondor archers on station here, ready to help out, and the side assault here from this somewhat depleted unit of Gondor infantry will also go some way to helping, and the Corsairs are very garbage. They certainly won't be enough to deal with Gondor infantry one-to-one, especially not when they're receiving backup here from guards of Osgiliath, a very strong pike unit. And you can bet that if Corsair pikemen rear their ugly heads in behind the wall again, that will be all the defenders need to start opening up with their skirmishers once again. and they have a plentiful supply of archers and Pelargir Marines, a lot of Pelargir Marines in fact, which are not half bad in melee. I mean, again, they're not going to win you the battle in melee, but they are certainly not useless in melee, which will come into play later. Another good hit there on the Axemen of the Sarnak, grazing hit on the cavalry as well. Axemen of the Sarnak are a good thing to hit. Certainly the more damaging units, some of the more damaging units which Gondor have available to them in this fight. Again, there's Morannon archers getting in here, which is sort of the attackers setting the stage for them trying to get some counter skirmish fire off, as well as the Corsair Blackguards. Immediately, however, the artillery doing damage to both of those units, and now the defensive archers once again starting to fire. The Corsair Blackguards in particular would be a target that I would certainly go after, because they're capable of doing a lot of damage, and there are still 27 of them left alive. This unit of Pelargir Marines still holding its nerve. They can't afford to use all their skirmish ammo in one go after all the defenders, but they are now starting to once again open up. Fodder. They were going after Blackguards, but they got fodder. I'm sure they're very disappointed about that. Meanwhile, I'd be interested to see how many kills actually these RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison archers manage to get, because they're not the sort of unit which will usually get a lot of kills. But in this situation, they have the perfect firing position, and a lot of the units they're going after are not exactly the most sturdy. Units like Orc Maulers and Corsairs will melt before arrow fire, regardless of how strong it really is. Unit Pelargir Marine sort of shifting itself around. Those guys are wavering, the Gondor archers just sort of waiting. Still the Orcs, victory seems certain for them on the front line here. Their numbers may start to tell as the battle goes on. Offensive artillery at this point going after this blob of troops over here. Guards of Osgiliath and Axemen of the Sarnak, a very juicy target indeed. More javelins, however. Oof. That crossfire of javelins. Lethal. Causing the attackers to become wavering. The trolls are now launching Rotten Meat. Rotten Meat can actually kill if it gets a direct hit, but only one unit model. And that's a sign that they are out of regular ammunition. And these javelins have well and truly turned this fight around. I'd imagine that this next wave of infantry from the Orcs is now going to start to break. The Morannon Guard, you know, give them their dues. The Morannon infantry and the Morannon Guard are still fighting on the front line. The Orc fodder would have routed long ago. There's more Morannon Guard coming forward now as well. This RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison, I think, is trying to sort of plug this gap to make sure the Orcs can't move around it. But another unit of infantry is required. Otherwise, the Orcs are going to be able to try and start wrapping up this blob of Gondor infantry. Gondor need to react fairly quickly here. The Morannon Guard are moving. Orc Maulers are here. Those Pelargir Marines, they have pulled out their swords, I think. Indeed they have. They might be out of ammunition. When Gondor starts running out of their javelin supply, that will be good news to the attackers. Still a lot of reserves, however, for Gondor, and obviously these are all units which the attackers will have to try and mulch their way through in melee as well. More units coming forward. Orc Maulers, which for once are not being peppered down with arrow fire, so they may actually be able to get some of their AP damage done in melee. Meanwhile, this RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison Cavalry is in sustained melee with spears, which is not going to go too well for them. A very brutal fight so far, obviously. The corpses of the attackers are blanketing the interior here of the gate at RAMMAS ECHOR. A lot of these units look like they're out of ammunition at this point, however, which is not great news. This unit still has its bows out, however, so they're not completely out of ammunition yet, which obviously is going to be a very important factor, because if it comes down to it in the late game, stuff like the Olag High, all of those units of Castamir's Legion are going to be far too much for the defenders to deal with from just a melee perspective. More damage being done here to the attackers. The Corsair Pikemen being targeted again. Corsair Pikemen and Orc Maulers are in here. Far too juicy a target for these archers to pass up. It is brutal, however. Arrows just flowing in. More units coming through. However, Castamir's Legion getting ready to move forwards. Which, as soon as they start coming in Castamir's Legion, you know that the attackers are a little bit more serious about this push. So we've got more Maulers, a healthy unit of Maulers, and a unit of Castamir's Legion. So I would imagine that we're going to start seeing what's left of the defenders' javelin supply used here, or perhaps even the artillery. That catapult is indeed firing. I'm certainly not surprised. There's now a bigger surface area to hit, and it includes very juicy targets. Civilians are being moved forward. Here comes the Gondorian catapult. Friendly fire. Not great for them, and they didn't really get too much damage done either. Archers firing into the side over here. Some of it is hitting the stakes, but some of it is going through and connecting with their targets. The civilians, only a few of them, trying to hold back the tide. The defenders are going to need to commit forward more infantry here, because now the attackers are trying to push through the beleaguered garrison defence. Again, there's a bit of friendly fire there. The catapults are... Oh, here come the javelins. Good to see them doing damage to the Castamir's Legion. A secondary defence going to need to be set up, which they have managed back here. You can see more garrison, as well as some axemen. Troll catapult, meanwhile, getting another nice hit on the axemen of the Sarnak. So finally, the attackers making a little bit more progress along the road. More hits from both pieces of artillery at this point, proving themselves to be very worthwhile additions to their armies. And it looks as though the attackers are just going to ignore this defence over here, possibly because there's Gondor infantry on tap, very readily available reinforcements. Looks like they're just going to try and punch right down the middle, which is maybe a little bit foolhardy, because that means Gondor can sort of flank them in two places. That's a little bit more like it, these Orc Maulers charging into the rear of the Gondor infantry and the guards of Osgiliath. Artillery fire being traded back and forth, those Gondor archers up on the hill. Nice damage being done to the Corsair pikemen and the Castamir's Legion. From the back, of course, their shields won't come into play, so they'll be a little bit more susceptible to this sort of thing. And over here, the Morannon Guard, obviously outclassed by the Gondor infantry with both levels of armour upgrade, so their spears will be bouncing right off that armour. Morannon archers trying to get into position, the attackers trying to do more skirmishing of their own, but obviously this is certainly a fight in which it's going to be difficult for them to get the most out of units like that. Orc fodder rushing forward. Getting more numbers in behind the wall is going to be important now. They can't afford to surrender the gains they've gained. Gained a lot of yards here, but they're going to need to push in more, which is good. Orc maulers, Orc fodder, Morannon infantry. More being committed to the front line, but again, more RAMMAS ECHOR garrisons standing in their way, delaying them every step of the way, allowing those Gondorian skirmishers to do their thing. Again, if this is the moment where one of them reveals that they've actually had a hidden unit of Athelian Rangers this whole time, but I don't believe that's going to be the case. Aprazani Nadubai with a very depleted unit, trying to get what damage done that they can. Still Gondorians fighting out here, although they're going to need to sort of retreat to a little bit more of a choke point, otherwise they are going to be swamped by all of these orcs. Hello. The Orc Javelins now giving the defenders a taste of their own medicine. A very, very nice volley there into the Pelagia Marines, which have been such a pain for them. Starling, I think, is probably going to want to retreat these guys, otherwise they're going to find themselves flattened by the Orc Javelins. They're trying to do as much damage as they can, which, depending on the amount of ammo they have left, might be the right thing to do. If they're just trying to use the last of their ammo, they may as well stay there and do what damage they can. More arrows being used, the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers, as all of these orcs start pouring forward. Again, and ignoring that choke point, so the possibility exists for Tidasium and Lango to charge in from the side. Obviously a very daunting task for the attackers. The Gondor infantry still holding very firmly. The Orc Maulers will do a little bit better than the Morannon Guard, but unfortunately for them, they're still taking a lot of arrow fire. And just in general, the Gondor infantry is of higher quality. The AP will do damage, but ultimately they are cheap, low-quality axemen, so they would lose overall. But it's all about cost efficiency for the Orcs, battle of attrition. It's not about getting the most kills, it's about winning the fight after all. That's the way the Orcs look at things. Meanwhile, these Morannon archers have snuck their way in behind enemy lines. I can't imagine they're going to last too long. I mean, all it's going to take is for even these civilians to surround them. There's also the Pinnithgallan cavalry right there. Again, if they go right into the backfield where the choke point ends back here, that's when the cavalry could become relevant again. So that's something else which the attackers have to bear in mind. Make sure that they leave some form of anti-cav for the late game. We now see some Axemen of Lasarnak being committed to the front line as well, which should finally finish off the last of this unit of Castamir's Legion, which, despite being peppered by javelins and arrows, they managed to last a long time. Very high quality unit indeed. Meanwhile, again, a bit of a counter charge here. Counter attack from Gondor as the Palagear Marines and some of the garrison units that are breaking ranks, trying to hit some squishier targets. There's a lot of Orc Maulers here. There's a lot of Orc Axes they're going to have to deal with, but they are actually being baited into the pike line, which the pikes are not high damage, but against a relatively fragile unit like the Orc Maulers, you're going to be able to get some good damage done. Meanwhile, defending artillery needs to be a little bit careful. One hit into this blob over here and it will be a disaster, but that's a very densely packed blob there as well, which is being hit by arrows in the back. Those Orc Javelins are trying to do some damage to the defending archers. Ooh. Yeah, that was always going to be the danger. That's a lot of friendly fire that was just done. They managed to hit the Orcs as well, but I feel as though the attackers can afford to take those blows more so than the defenders. Here comes the Olag High. Another sign which that the attackers mean business. I think maybe all of the Javelins have used up all their ammo, so the Olag High can afford to stand there and be relatively fine. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers are not going to be able to do enough damage to really bother Olag High, but even so they do fall back. Upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak being committed forward, and this push from Froggy is trying to make something happen, but I can't help but feel as though this attack is going to peter out with the addition of those archers just adding some mass, and in particular the Axemen. Also this infantry with both levels of armour upgrades. This push is probably not going to go too well. Gondor are going to be able to hold, I think. Orc Javelins getting into position, which could do some nice damage to the back of this Gondor infantry. Meanwhile, this assault over here is still going, but it is also running out of steam. There's not a lot of defensive infantry over here, and there are more Orc Javelins on the way forward, which maybe have used up their ammunition and are just going to be committed to melee. Of course, they're basically just Orc fodder when that happens, though, so again, not the highest quality. The Gondor infantry is going to have no trouble whatsoever engaging Orc Javelins in melee. And there's still plentiful units that they can commit forward again, even if they're just there for numbers. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers. Pinnith Galen cavalry from Rules. Maybe trying to morale shock these units, because really that was just sort of rubbing up against his own men with regards to the charge. Surprisingly, a direct hit on a very weak unit. Here come the Olag High. The Olag High may be the catalyst for Gondor to start committing forward more men to this defensive position. Because this Gondor infantry has had a pretty good time of it so far. That was another nice hit. Very densely packed formations once again getting pounded into submission by the artillery pieces. It has been a long and brutal fight up to this point. Palagear Marines now moving to the aid of this Gondor infantry. Now though, the attackers are going to have the ability to get their own archers in position without fear of as much reprisal. Of course the defenders do still have some archers, but not quite to the extent that they used to. And that is of course going to allow the attackers to get some of their own archers in, try and play the skirmish game a little bit themselves now. Palagear Marines are shaken. Meanwhile, how is this fight going? Obviously this push from Froggy was bold, but it hasn't really come to anything. The Axemen of Lasarnak and the Gondor infantry simply too much for some of the lower tier Orcs. The Orc Javelins will be able to do a decent amount of damage though. Got a decent position over here as well. Prasani Nadubawi trying to do some damage of their own. Relatively chaotic front line here, but still Gondor managing to keep enough semblance of order. Pinnith Galen cavalry, that was a very bold, perhaps reckless charge, because the Olag High are going to be able to break the backs of those horses in any sort of sustained melee fight. Meanwhile, the Olag High may have actually bitten off a little bit more than they can chew themselves, because they're really trying to hold down the fort all on their own over here, and that has prompted Starling to commit forward his Caer Andor Swordmasters, which will be able to do a decent job against the Olag High, particularly after all of the action they've already seen. Here comes another big wave from the attackers. Obviously the attackers have just been trying to make something happen. Another charge, but again, not really up to much. Still Guards of Osgiliath over here, still Gondor infantry. Of course, our pikemen already becoming shaken, so once again, the most fragile units for the attackers are being targeted by the archers. It's been a good choice of targets, I have to say, from the defenders so far. They've been going after stuff like Orc Maulers, Corsair pikemen, the sort of things which even basic Gondor archers like this are going to be able to mow down with impunity. Really taking away some of the numbers for the attackers. Obviously this could bite them in the end when they have to face stuff like the Corsair Fencers, the Castamir's Legion, Abrazanin, Narduzagar. We'll see. Here come the Trolls. The Orc Javelins could be making their presence felt as well as time goes on, but here come more defensive arrows flowing into the attackers as they move forward. But Castamir's Legion on the front line now. Umbar are starting to commit forward some of their serious units. Is this where the defence starts to fall apart? We shall see. The defenders do still have a lot of units that they can commit forward should they need to. Kaerandros Swordmaster at this point being forced to hold down the fort alongside that unit of Gondor infantry. They have managed to finish off what looks to be pretty much the last of the Olag High, though. The Olag High will... There's only 4 of them remaining, it looks like. 5. But that isn't going to be a force that's too scary anymore. They are now joining forces with the Troll Catapult, but the Troll Catapult, of course, not as good as their regular Troll brethren, but they are also going after only RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison Archers, which are already looking like routing. Definitely the right choice of target there. They're going to need some support here, these garrison units. Otherwise, a hole will open up and then the Orcs can start pouring through here. Obviously, here we have some veterans of Osgiliath, which I actually missed in the army comps. And they have got the level up the armour upgrades as well. Obviously, better archers, so they're going to be able to do some very nice damage themselves. But the real problem could be right in front of them, because you can see here the Orcs. I think this is a good spot from the Orcs. I think they see where the defence is at its weakest. When it's just RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison Archers holding the line, apply some pressure and it should start to fall apart. Those Gondor Archers are still shooting. This front line over here is likely to start taking damage as well. The Castamir's Legion, they may be taking some ranged fire by the looks of things, but they are still of significantly higher quality than most of the Gondorian units here. Even the Gondor infantry with the... and they're also getting shot in the side, so yeah. The 2 side paths, the attacks are now having much more luck in. Over here in the middle, however, more reinforcements are abound. The Guards of Osgiliath heading to the front line, and they're going to be able to get their pikes down and keep those Morannon infantry units at bay. The Troll Drummers are over here, which means the attacks are probably not going to be suffering the same level of breakage as they were earlier on in the fight. As we enter the final 10,000 frames, we can see that the attackers are losing by a fairly substantial margin. Obviously, we have noted in the past the attackers tend to pull it back in the late game, but this is 4 defensive armies against 4 attacking armies, so we shall see. Those Guards of Osgiliath just pulling out again. More halberds on the way forward. And I would say that the attackers may very well be running out of steam here, but this is something they can take great encouragement from. The Trolls, the Troll Catapult and the Olag High, as well as these Morannon units, have managed to break through. We have a breakthrough.
We've lost half of our men.
This would actually be a good opportunity for the defensive cavalry to be used, because this is a relatively open part of the field. You could send your cavalry over here and start charging in, but I think they're a little bit too far away to actually be readily used. There's more RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison Archers which are being thrown under the bus. That, I think, is going to be a bit of an issue for the defenders as time goes on, because obviously they may hold the lead, but their troops overall are probably of lower quality, significantly lower quality actually, than the attackers, and you can see that several of these front lines now are starting to fall apart. Castamir's Legion and Abrazani and Narduzagar with the support of these Troll Catapult crew. The Troll Catapult crew doing a pretty decent amount of damage here to these Axemen of the Sarnak. Gondor Archers, we can see now the cavalry being committed forward. Again, I don't know how useful that cavalry is going to be. Don't know how useful the lower tier defensive units are going to be when faced with the Umbar army. Castamir's Legion and Narduzagar, we also still have a pretty plentiful supply of these Orcs which can be used for support. Well, these Trolls, that is Master Blaster's General as well in the Troll Catapult. Fancy that. Well, these RAMMAS ECHOR Garrison Archers once again being tasked with holding the line. A task far above their pay grade really, but they're trying their best nonetheless. This central defensive line is still holding firm. The Guards of Osgiliath are obviously going to be helping out with that a great deal, as they will over here. Castamir's Legion having to go up against these pikemen. There's also Gondor infantry getting ready to reinforce also. We'll see what Rules can do with all of this cavalry that he has. This unit of Axemen of the Sarnak, meanwhile, thoroughly outnumbered at this point. Fodder with the support of the Castamir's Legion. The Abrazani Narduzagar charging up the hills. They're going to be able to engage the Gondor Archers in melee from the side, and obviously Narduzagar are going to be far too strong for Gondor Archers in melee. Those Axemen of the Sarnak are breaking as well, so this could be where the attackers start to pull it back. Again, a bit of friendly fire more than anything else there, going through their own cavalry units. could be the sort of thing which costs the defenders dearly as time goes on. Ah, we've got some Gondor cavalry as well, which is Spear Cav with both levels of armour upgrades. Again, something else which I missed. Spear Cav is still going to be able to do a lot of damage off the charge, and their armour upgrades will help them last a little bit longer. There's some Round on archers as well, which prime target for charging. They're going to be relatively defenceless against that sort of thing. And there's not a lot of trolls left either, and it's only troll catapult crew anyway. So this charge would probably skewer what's left of the troll catapult. That could also be enough to... Yeah, you can see there that the troll catapult ultimately getting mangled there, but they did manage to break the charge, and the Morannon archers ultimately were not engaged in melee, managing to get another volley off into the Gondor cavalry, so fine margins like that could be how the battle is decided. Well, more and more defensive resources being committed forward now, more Axemen of Lasarnak sorely needed on the front line to help try and deal with the Casimir's Legion, which, with the support of the Corsair pikemen, are slowly starting to break the back of this defence led by the guards of Osgiliath. I'm a little bit surprised actually that the Gondor infantry is not being committed forward to help. You know how I feel about wave-based defences. Gondor infantry with the armour upgrades going into the Narduzagar, who were depleted. Against Gondor archers that wouldn't have mattered, but it will matter against fully upgraded Gondor infantry. But they're also going to receive some support from the Casimir's Legion. Umbar also going to be fighting downhill, which will give them a hand. The Orcs starting to pull out wide a little bit here. They are being harassed by Rules' cavalry, but Rules can't really flatten this entire army. It's not as if he's got a unit of knights at his disposal. It is militia cav, so he can really do little other than delay this force. There are more reinforcements on the way forward, however, and it's Gondor infantry. There are more Axemen in reserve. There's Citadel Guard as well. So the defenders do have the tools, actually, and they might have too much for the attackers here. It may be that the attackers lost too much in those early exchanges to those javelins and those archers, and the defenders utilised their resources in just the way they were required. The veterans of Osgiliath are now on the front line fighting the Morannon infantry, and the veterans of Osgiliath, unlike the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers, very much at home in melee just as much as they are at range. And they will be able to defeat Morannon infantry. Meanwhile, without the shield of the trolls, these Gondor cavalry is still trying to charge into the Morannon archers, but unfortunately loose formation means they're not able to kill off the archers quickly enough, and they will be skirmished down. But still, more damage was done. Making sure the archers don't hit the Gondor infantry at this point is probably the most important thing. Making sure that the defensive lines keep their shape. The Corsair fencers are on the front line. Their AP will of course be very, very helpful against the Gondorians as they try to hold. There's the Axemen of the Sarnak shaken, taking a lot of arrow fire, which obviously again a very good choice, particularly without the armour upgrades. They're going to be very susceptible to that sort of thing. More resources are being committed forward now. I think Lango needs to get all of these men in position now, otherwise, again, wave-based defences may cost the defenders. Pynethgalen cavalry charging into the Orc fodder. They could break off this fodder if they get a nice charge in there. One player has admitted defeat, I'm not sure who that is. While these Casimir's Legion fighting uphill against a lot of these Axemen. Casimir's Legion are of significant quality that they can probably finish off the Axemen of Lasarnak, but they will have to pay their dues to do so. Also, Blackguards also over here.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Abrazani Nadibawi trying to do some damage here. You can see the Pynethgalen cavalry getting a nice charge there into the rear of the Casimir's Legion. Now Lango's reinforcements are starting to reveal themselves. Kerandros Swordmasters. The catapult crew's coming forward, but there's also Citadel Guard somewhere. More Axemen of Lasarnak, exactly what the Doctor ordered for the defenders over here. Pelagia Marines that still have ammunition. Well, there's a thing. Another general falls over there. However, those veterans of Osgiliath are more than sufficient to kill off that attacking force. Lango needs to start running his men here. I think there's a bit of a lack of urgency. You know, the defensive lines are starting to fall apart. I mean, they might be alright at this point, to be fair. Kerandros Swordmaster, Citadel Guard, these are strong units. Elsewhere on the battlefield, things are also going very well. The Orc fodder getting absolutely dumpstered by Axeman. The catapult crew coming forward, just sort of tying up the Casimir's Legion. Obviously, the catapult crew, in terms of stats, are actually the worst melee units in the game. So Casimir's Legion will easily be able to defeat them. A lot of these units just sort of holding back these Umbar forces. More units coming forward, more halberds. It's just a matter of who runs out of steam first, really. Ooh, this could be grisly. The Orc Javelin's getting into position, going to try and shoot the veterans of Osgiliath in the back, but Starling is on top of it. He sees them coming. and the veterans of Osgiliath are going to chase them down, and if they still have ammunition, which they certainly do, this is a worthwhile thing to try and kill off. Another unit is required. There's more civilians back there. Lango has got a lot of units in reserve which he needs to stop messing around with and get them into melee. Now is the time to try and break the attackers. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison taking arrow fire, but if the defenders were going to take casualties on anything, it would be on these guys. This unit of civilians needs to go into the javelins to try and stop them. There's still a few very depleted units of cavalry trying to make a nuisance of themselves, trying to inflict casualties on them. There's some breakage in the middle, however. It's over on this side of the battlefield where things are going to be decided, I feel. The Caer Andros Swordmasters are over here, which certainly the Castamir's Legion will have a quality advantage over most things on the field today, but when it comes to dealing damage, not against the Caer Andros Swordmasters. RAMMAS ECHOR garrison archers, they could surround this area over here, or they could try and get up onto the hills. This is a problem, actually. The attackers have managed to seize these hills, get their own skirmishers up there. Catapult crew is busy being destroyed by Castamir's Legion. Those Gondor infantrymen are doing their best to hold the Corsair Blackguard in place. This unit of fodder has refused to rout, which is to its great credit, because it's tied up this unit of axemen for a long time, which probably should have been committed elsewhere, wasting their time on the fodder. And it's margins such as that which could decide this fight. Caer Andros Swordmasters, however, with the Gondor infantry, going to be enough to defeat the vast majority of the orcs which are left on the field, which honestly, you know, if the Umbar elites don't manage to make something happen, that could be the end. Meanwhile, Lango has moved his civilians in to intercept the javelins. Good move. But over here you can see the Troll Drummers. This could be the end of the veterans of Osgiliath. A brave performance it has been from them. But I think the Troll Drummers and the Morannon Archers are going to be enough to finally finish them off. Arrows still flying back and forth. Morannon Guardsmen coming forward. That's going to be enough to break this RAMMAS ECHOR garrison as well, so this side and the centre have been taken by the attackers, but a huge amount of the defensive power still resides over here. We also have the Naru Naaru Sentinels coming forward, as well as the Corsair Fencers. It could be that Lango's choice to sort of delay the reinforcements he was giving, and a bit of indecision over here, could be the difference between victory and defeat. I mean, slowly but surely the defenders are starting to retake this hilltop. Pelagia Marines with the Axemen starting to get into the archers, but there's still a lot of Umbar elites that they need to deal with. There's also units over here, Narduzagar, Blackguards. Yeah, I think maybe, I mean, it's going to be very close regardless. We are in the final stages of this fight, most certainly. Blackguards moving in, Gondor infantry. Axemen of Lasarnak, victory seems certain. But, I mean, against Morannon halberds, yes. If they're taking ranged fire and they're engaged with the Narduzagar at the same time, then no, I don't think so. The Gondor infantry indeed is routing off. That could be the problem here. Gondor's morale not really doing a great job at holding itself together. The Citadel Guard need to get into the fight somewhere. While these Orc fodder starts to move on, yeah, I think the attackers might just have enough to take this home. What is this going on out here? Orc fodder from Froggy. That's where his general was. I would assume that his is one of the generals that has already perished. And the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison starting to break off. Citadel Guard starting to get into melee, but the Naru Naaru Sentinels are waiting for them. If they can get their pikes down, they can join this long phalanx, but really it all comes down to Umbar at this point. The Narduzagar are moving forward, getting into a very weird position. These halberds need to move in as well. Master Blaster dragging his heels a bit there as well. Here they come. Morannon Archers also getting into position. It's going to be very close indeed. The Narduzagar, that was a poor engagement for them to take actually. They managed to get themselves surrounded by Axemen and by Swordmasters without the support of those halberds. Could be the end of them. Meanwhile, these fencers are also over here. Defeat is a possibility. They're with the javelins, getting into those Citadel Guardsmen. There's more units over here. There's still the Pinnith Gelling cavalry. There's some civilians. That's Lango's general. As Orc fodder did chase something off far too far away. Now they're coming back, however there's more Gondorians coming back that presumably routed previously and are now coming back. Tundra's Fox with Morannon Archers that still have ammo. The fact that they still have some skirmish potential here in the late game could be the difference. And it might be that this comes down to morale.
Our army's running from the field. Rally our men.
A nice charge there. That's not Lango's army. One of the Gondorian armies is, however, gone. Moran archers coming in here. Orc javelins trying to get into a better position, it would seem. Pelagia Marines trying to wrap up the line, but they don't really have the punch to do that. Narduzagar fighting hard, at the very least tying up a lot of units. There's a big cluster of halberds up here on the side as well. These Moran archers, what are they firing at? Yeah, good choice. The Axemen, they may have the armour upgrade, but they're unshielded. Also, you can't miss them from that close, and they are routing. That might be it. That might be, again, just a sign that Gondor don't have quite enough to defend RAMMAS ECHOR here. We saw a successful defence of Minas Tirith, but I don't know if we're going to see a successful defence of RAMMAS ECHOR. You can see over there the floating windmill in the background. Dark magic at work. And again, the Citadel Guard maybe should have been committed a little bit earlier. I feel as though when they were committed, the writing was already on the wall. Still some fences in here as well. Yeah, 59 fences. That's a lot. I don't think Gondor have got the ability to beat them in melee at this point, and melee is all they have left. They've got some guards of Osgiliath, but now they're going to be surrounded. Moran halberds completing the encirclement. That's more AP. That's more routing. Yeah, Gondor's forces at this point falling apart, and I think we're going to see an attacking victory. Here come the troll drummers, using their giant drumsticks. And there goes the Citadel Guard. Not every day you see the Citadel Guard rout off. Could a unit of ones of the White Tower have been the difference? Here come the Corsair Blackguards. There's really very little of Gondor's armies left at this point. Representing Nadu-Bawib in the backfield. Yeah, mass routing. Retreat to Minas Tirith, which I believe actually was the next battle in the RP, but we've already seen a Minas Tirith battle recently. So, Sauron and his evil forces will make it to Minas Tirith. RAMMAS ECHOR was not able to stop his invasion for long. Here we can see the Axemen of the Sarnak trying to get some consolation kills. Again, I'm a big fan of the Axemen of the Sarnak. An Axeman which has got a little bit more durability. Usually Axemen like this don't have such.
But a cruel twist of fate that snatched victory from our grasp.
Very close indeed, and once again the attackers managing to pull it back in the late game. So the attackers victorious. Umbar getting the most kills, which again doesn't surprise me too much. They had the smallest army, but they also had by far and away the most quality when it came to their melee potential. Froggy getting the least amount of kills. That to me says that he was probably the one which took the vast majority of the arrow damage and javelin damage, which he did have a fair amount of Orc Maulers, so that does make a good deal of sense. As for the defenders, Starling getting the most kills, again, that will probably come down to ranged firepower, archers and the like. Lango getting a lot of kills. Rules, doesn't surprise me that he got the least kills actually here, because he had the vast bulk of the cavalry, and the cavalry wasn't terribly useful. But let's actually go and see what was what, because I think we'll be able to see every army. So here we can see Starling. Veterans of Osgiliath with their slightly higher damage getting over 500 kills, which of course on a non-archer, or non-ranger archer unit I should say, is very, very impressive. A lot of units getting over 300 kills obviously with their RAMMAS ECHOR garrison, all of them in fact, so that's obviously very impressive. Pelagia Marines getting less kills, but also that's armor piercing damage. A lot of morale shocks were had because of the Marines as well. Swordmasters, Guards of Osgiliath. Gondor Infantry getting over nearly 350 kills, which is impressive. Down here we can see rules. Let's see what the cavalry did, which is the most important thing here. Yeah, Pinnithgalen Cavalry getting over 100, with the RAMMAS ECHOR garrison not managing to crack that 100 barrier, which they kind of needed to if they were going to win here. And obviously a lot of his infantry was civilians, unupgraded Axeman. So his potential there was obviously going to be lower. Gondor Cavalry was where his general was, and they ultimately ended up getting focused by a unit of Moran archers. Tydassium, again, we can see Gondor archers getting the most kills. Archers always going to get the most kills in this sort of situation. And finally, Lango, the one who sent me the replay, his most important unit seems to be the Gondor archers, getting a lot of kills between them. The catapult obviously getting 432 as well. What did this catapult up here get? Yeah, 462. So again, very important part of their armies. The catapult's doing a lot of morale damage as well as getting a lot of kills. But ultimately, it wasn't quite enough. It was very close. Thin margins here, or fine margins, I should say. It was close. And I feel as though the defenders perhaps could have won that. I feel as though all of those forces that Lango had in reserve at the end If they had been committed earlier when he had more of a position to reinforce, they could have actually won this. The cavalry as well. In defensive rules, I think the cavalry would have been too useful anyway. I mean, it could have been used very late game. Like if he had all of his cavalry in the late game that he could have used to charge into his foes, then it could have been a little bit more devastating. But we'll never know that. Well played to everyone involved, and well played to the attackers, of course, because they won. Commiserations to the defenders. Big thank you to Lango for sending this to me. Big thank you to Froggy for making the map. It certainly was a much more interesting experience than vanilla RAMMAS ECHOR, with those hills, the terrain features, the fact that the gate wasn't the only defining feature of the map. So yeah, big thank you to him. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.